Good morning. Today I am discussing the major loss by Prince Harry and others in the court case against the newspapers. First, I will talk about the facts of the case, then give a quick rundown of the decision, then I'll talk about Harry's reaction, and the thing that I'm really interested in is the lawyer's role in the case, because a lot of people say that the only winners in this case are the lawyers, and that the lawyers should never have brought this case in the first place. So as you all probably know, Harry's been suing various newspapers all over the place for invasion of privacy. He believes that his phone was hacked and other illegal methods were employed to gather stories about him, and the ones that he most commonly refers to are the stories about his relationship with Chelsea Davies and how the alleged phone hacking, ruined that relationship, which I can tell you, Meghan Markle is not happy about him banging on about this old relationship that got ruined by the media. Anyway, so he got together with Elton John and Liz Hurley and a few others, and they sued these newspapers. Now, Harry has had a previous case in which there was a victory. One or two of the stories that the journalists wrote, they couldn't account for in any other way. Anyway, there was settlements in previous cases, and then there was one where there was a partial victory. So Harry has famously said he's the dragon slayer. He wants to hold the news media to account. Now, the ridiculousness is that some newspapers did engage in phone hacking, and that was even admitted decades ago. There was a public inquiry, there was a commission of inquiry, and News of the World newspaper famously went bankrupt because of this whole drama and saga. But that's not what we're talking about. We've fast forwarded decades, and as usual, Harry cannot let a thing go. Now he's saying this other newspaper engaged in phone hacking, and the decision came out today. And the decision was that Harry's side did not prove the case. They did not prove that any of the articles that they complained about, and I think there was about 50 articles, not one of them did they prove that there was likely to be this illegal information gathering. So, of course, Prince Harry has put out a furious statement saying that it's a whitewash. I'm not sure that he knows what whitewash means, because whitewash is like a complete victory. Anyway, that's what I think it means. Anyway, he says it's a whitewash, basically that the judge has done the wrong thing, made the wrong decision. And he said something very weird in his statement. He said he referred back to the other court decisions where there was a partial victory, and he said something about the generic findings in the other cases. So basically, generically, the other courts held that there had been phone hacking and illegal information gathering at that time. It was saying the judge in this case should have applied those generic findings of illegal information gathering. So because some people engaged in illegal information gathering, he thought that was enough to win this particular case. And he doesn't understand that if he is accusing somebody of illegal information gathering, he has to prove it. Okay, he's the one who's making the claim, he has to prove it. And so why this is such a big issue is that the money involved in the legal aspect of this case has been massive. Millions and millions of pounds. So each side gave an estimate of what their costs would be, and I think it was 19 million pounds on the one side and 18 million pounds on the other side. So now the loser is going to have to pay the winner's legal fees, and wow, that legal bill is incredible. So now a lot of people are saying, well, the only winners in this case are the lawyers. The lawyers should not have taken the case, and basically intimating that the lawyers are somehow engaging in predatory behavior or something like this. Well, I take issue with that for a couple of reasons. One thing is that if somebody wants to bring a case in the courts, that's what the lawyers are there for. And as a lawyer myself, I know that I've had cases where I've had to advise my clients that it's not a very strong case. Chances of success are quite low. In this particular case, I'm not sure what the advice would have been that Harry received, but of course, right at the beginning, there was potentially evidence from a private investigator that allegedly worked for these newspapers, but about, I know, say just a couple of months before, no, years before the hearing, it came out that the investigator denied that he'd given the written statement that was attributed to him. And then about a few months before the hearing date, that private investigator came out again and he said, Harry's lawyers have put into evidence this written statement allegedly from me. I never made that statement. I never ever worked for these news organizations, and I am prepared to give evidence to say that. But he was afraid, and he didn't want to go into court to give the evidence because he said he was afraid of being physically harmed. So now this is the guy that was supposed to give evidence in support of Harry and the other plaintiffs, saying he's concerned for his safety if he comes out and confirms that the evidence the written evidence they've attributed to him is not his evidence. So he's worried that Harry's side is going to come after him. So it would surprise me if none of the lawyers were in trouble for that. There should be an ethics complaint to find out what happened there, because if somebody falsified evidence, clearly they should not be lawyers. They need to be struck off. So there's been no reporting around that. But the mere fact that your client has a case that is not a very strong case doesn't mean that you can't bring it or that you shouldn't bring it. And law is a very strange beast, because sometimes you might think you don't have a very good shot at winning, but you actually do win. And one of my very first cases that I argued in court was one of those cases. And I'd said to my client, it was a trademark dispute, and I'd said to my client, look, I don't believe the facts are very strong on your side, and I believe there's a much bigger chance that we're going to lose than that we're going to win, and explain this to them and explain why the evidence that we had just was not very strong, I didn't think. But knowing that, would you like me to go ahead, and this is what it's going to cost? And the client said, look, I do want it to go ahead. This is so important to me. I understand we've only got a small chance of winning, but part of my client in that situation was that they wanted the matter aired before the courts. They wanted to have their say in court, and the winning or the losing wasn't so important to them. Now, of course, in this case, Harry was very wedded to a positive outcome because he wanted to show everybody that the newspapers were evil. But in my trademark case, that very first one, and because our evidence was not very strong, I provided a very sort of technical legal argument, and I actually ended up winning that case. So that's an example of the decision to go ahead is the client's decision, not the lawyer's decision. And I was surprised. I did not expect us to win that particular case, but we did. So you can't ever say that it's a surefire win. A case is going to be a surefire win or a surefire loss. And I think Harry clearly was basing his decision on the fact that other similar cases had been won. So you can't say that his lawyers were going ahead with a case that was obviously going to lose, because of course you don't know what evidence is going to come out until you get to the court case. And in this particular case, the journalists actually came and gave evidence, and they gave evidence as to how they gathered the information, that they had cultivated sources. And famously, Charlotte Griffiths came and gave her Facebook messages that she had exchanged with Harry, private Facebook messages where she was talking about having movie cuddles with him and movie snuggles or something like that. So Harry had said in his evidence he didn't know any journalists. There's no way they would have infiltrated his circle. And then she comes up with these very embarrassing Facebook messages and saying, well, not only did we know each other and go to the same parties, but we were quite close. And so that just undermined Harry's credibility significantly. And the judge found the journalists to be very reliable, and he thought that their evidence was honest. So their evidence was not based on feelings. This was a problem with Harry's evidence. His evidence was based on, I felt like somebody had hacked my phone, and there was no other way that they could possibly have known, other than bribing people or intercepting my mail or placing illegal listening devices. There was no other way that they could have known of this information that they reported. However, the journalists were able to show there were other ways that they could have known, like by going to parties with the person and exchanging these rather intimate messages. So that just made, firstly, it made Harry look like he was giving false testimony when he said he didn't know these people. So there's that. But secondly, there were good, solid explanations. And the journalists, when they gave their evidence, they didn't over dramatize it or overstate their case. In many situations, they said, look, this was however many decades ago when I wrote this article. For this particular article, I can't remember exactly who the person was that told me, but they could say generally these were the kind of sources that they would have used, people in Harry's circle or being in Harry's circle, and the fact that was they couldn't remember exactly for each one. They could definitively say they never paid anybody to do anything illegal. They never themselves bugged anybody's phone. They never themselves intercepted any calls. So you could see that and the judges come out very strongly saying that the journalists came across as extremely credible. And yeah, so this narrative that the only winners are the lawyers, well, I do think that is unfair, because the fact that other cases against other newspapers were won, means that Harry's case did have a chance of winning. So it's not a case of they took on a case that they knew was never going to succeed. No, this was a case where it was a roll of the dice, and Harry's side's evidence just didn't stack up for this particular judge. And having heard, we didn't directly hear the evidence, but we heard the reports of the evidence as it was given. And having heard those reports, it seems to me that the judge's decision was correct. And so, the lawyers, they would have put a lot of thousands of hours into this case. It's a lot of hard work. It's not like they just turned up in court and said a few words and got $19 million. That's not how it works. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And so that is the decision in that case. Harry has lost. And he's going to be, him and his co-plaintiffs are going to be on the hook for millions of pounds to pay the other side's costs. And yeah, the lawyers, I think would have been a very interesting case for them. And each side really fought as hard as they could, presented the best evidence they had. And at the end of the day, Harry's side did not have the evidence needed. And I do believe in a previous case, a lot of it turned on how Harry felt he had been hacked, and I felt that the judge had been not as firm about the evidence. What I'm used to is every single fact needs to have evidence to back it up, and you saying, oh, there's no other way they could have known that I was dating Chelsea, that's not a fact. That's not a fact. All right, thank you very much, and let me know what you would like to hear next.